Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host Dylan Woods. First of all, it's been a while since I've uploaded anything on this channel. As I've said before, I'm currently engaged in a lot of other projects that consume most of my time. When these projects are concluded, and most of them are very close to being concluded, I will devote more of my time to this channel. I will aim to come up with a steady schedule that would allow for at least one video to be uploaded each week. Might be more, but that all remains to be seen. Without further ado, welcome back to GeoPod. There's been a lot going on the past couple months within the geopolitical sphere, and I'm here to discuss some of the most intricate and most important matters, at least in my opinion, that I would like to delve a little bit deeper into. Starting with the SCO, or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Well, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a little bit of background information, was brought into life by China's head of state, Xi Jinping, with the aim of forming a bloc to counter Western hegemony. Now, last week, the SCO has had multiple summits, multiple meetings, multiple conventions, where they sought to expand their influence, increase their partnerships, and bolster their ties, all in aim of furthering their stance and deepening their stance to eventually pose a challenge against the West. I've said it before upon this channel, the SCO and organizations like it, or rather the expanding political, economical and military bloc, which at the helm stands Russia, North Korea, China and Iran, currently stands as the greatest threat towards the Western world. The greatest threat the Western world has seen in decades. Perhaps the greatest threat it has seen ever since the conclusion of the Second World War. The reason for that is because the totalitarians as of this point in time seem to have learned that the only way to effectively oppose the West is by adhering to strategies similar to the ones that they employ themselves. NATO, the military bloc of the transatlantic, consisting of most European nations and the United States and Canada, has long formed the backbone of Western strength and influence across the globe. So obviously, any party that seeks to oppose that influence and that power and that threshold would seek to form a similar alliance as the one NATO currently has. Now, Russia, back in the Cold War, has tried numerous ways to form a similar alliance. The CSTO stands as the greatest example of that, which means the Collective Security Treaty Organization, which mostly comprised of Russia and some Eurasian countries such as Kazakhstan, but never any real, but never a truly hard hitter within the geopolitical sphere. Now, lately, there seems to be a shift in that. Russia no longer seems to be primarily occupied by trying to sway European or Eurasian countries to their side. They now have their eyes set on bigger fish. They've bolstered their ties with North Korea, Iran and China. Even formed a bilateral security pact with North Korea ever since, or in the years that they have been fighting within Ukraine, the war that is still ongoing and is still taking quite a toll on Russia's armed forces. Nevertheless, what we're seeing now is bolstering partnerships between these four countries, militarily, economically and politically, but also their urge and ambition to further expand. Already we've seen numerous countries outside their sphere, countries that for a very long time have been quite skeptical regarding China and Russia, countries such as India, who now appear to be more willing to follow their whim and eventually, perhaps at one point in time, even integrate themselves into a security alliance similar to the one NATO currently has. Obviously, this stands as a very dire threat towards Western security in general. For a very long time, Western security doctrine has emphasized solitary threats, more or less, right? The threats of Russia's aggression, especially aimed towards Eastern Europe. Obviously, the global terrorist threat was a threat that was more intricate and required NATO to expand their partnerships more on a global level. But it never really institutionalized itself within these global partnerships. More or less, the alliance, the partner states that allied themselves with NATO were more or less limited towards the transatlantic and in particularly Europe or those countries north of the Tropic Cancer, as is written within the Washington Treaty of 1949, by the way. However, now we're seeing that China and Russia do not adhere, do not limit themselves to those exact parameters. They're seeking to expand the SCO, not just regionally, but globally, luring in actors and parties from not just Southeast Asia, but the Middle East as well, Africa, and even Latin America. So what that means is that the SCO seeks to form an alliance that can outmaneuver NATO on a global scale, thereby making it obsolete in the long term. That is their end goal, right? We all are aware of China's ambition to become the world's foremost superpower, an ambition Russia shares, by the way. But as for now, they seem to be quite willing to play second fiddle to China, at least to all strategic matters, given the fact that they're engaged in a very tiresome war and they need all the help that they can get. So, and I've said it again on this channel, what can NATO do to counter this threat? Well, first and foremost, it's expand upon Articles 5 and 6. Expand upon those articles that limit your purview. NATO must expand globally, not just with partnerships, but with active member states. You must outmaneuver the SCO before it can mature into the effective organization and institutionalized organization that NATO is as of right now. Global expansion stands as the backbone of such a strategy. The perimeters outlined within the Washington Treaty of 1949 are no longer relevant, they are no longer applicable. The world has changed. The totalitarians have aligned themselves with each other's strategic objectives. And although they may not be any concrete notion of security pacts as of this point in time, they very well might get there in the near future. Talking 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, who knows? But that's what they're aiming towards. That's what they're actively moving towards. So you as NATO on the other side of that spectrum, you must cut them off before these potential security pacts are in place. I've previously named 4 countries that I believe would be great assets to the NATO alliance. Primarily among them are Japan and Australia. Australia and New Zealand, let's call them 3. Oceania and Japan. All 3 of these nations have had long-standing ties with NATO, long-standing partnerships with NATO. Both house considerable military power, especially Japan. Japan's armed forces are quite on the path to being some of the most advanced forces within the region. So obviously those states would be very welcome additions to the NATO alliance. Countries that not only can carry their own weight, but can also add to the organization's already vast military expertise. South Korea and the Philippines are other countries, in my opinion, that should be taken into consideration. Although South Korea might be one of the most controversial ones among them, given its close proximity with North Korea and China, and its relations with those 2 countries, but might very well be an addition to NATO, given the fact that they have a very effective fighting force, very advanced, very well organized, clean command and control structure. And you have to understand that they have adapted their armed forces in such a way to be effective against a nuclear armed North Korea, right? So obviously you're looking at every way where you can get an advantage against an enemy with such weaponry. So those 4 countries out of the top of my head might be eligible for NATO member status at some point in time. But the fact of the matter remains is that NATO needs to expand on a global level. And again, we are looking towards the United States. Don't. France, Germany and the United Kingdom, these 3 nations need to stand up. Great powers of old that need to make their voices heard again throughout the geopolitical sphere. Africa is a very contested continent right now, where both China and Russia and Iran, by the way, are all seeking to gain significant influence, and where the US influence has dwindled significantly in recent years. So that's a continent where NATO should definitely put their focus on. Latin America, another very unstable continent, is on bad foot with the United States regarding all the drug trafficking that's emanating from there. Obviously, this is something that China and Russia or Iran would seek to take advantage of, swaying them to the SCO in the near or distant future. The Middle East, although the US still has a decent foothold within the Middle East, its influence had waned somewhat ever since its retreat from and withdrawals from Afghanistan and Iraq. Although there still are some troops there left, they will all leave within a certain time frame. So obviously that will dwindle US influence directly within the region. So what NATO and the Western world need to do in order to combat this is rethink their global strategy. Their regional strategy stands: countering Russia, make sure Russia cannot gain more territory, especially not territory that's currently related to those belonging to NATO member states. But what about beyond those borders? What lies beyond Eurasia? That's also a lot of threats emanate from those territories. And of course, I'm talking primarily about China and Iran. What NATO must also do, or rather, not necessarily NATO, but what Western nations must also get through their skull, is that you need to take strategic winnings as they come. And right now I'm more talking about the Israel-Iran war of June this year. Israel, in my opinion, did the West a huge favor by degrading Iran's capabilities to such an extent. As I've said, Iran currently stands as one of the four main parties furthering the SCO and furthering this anti-Western bloc. So obviously, if one of those parties gets significantly degraded by efforts of a country beyond the NATO alliance, that's a perfect situation for you. Yet instead, we condemn Israel because we have sentiments regarding another conflict that's currently taking place, which has absolutely no direct influence on our own security whatsoever. Rather, if Israel succeeds in defeating Hamas, it would only stand as a further blow towards the security apparatus of Iran and its axis of resistance and proxy networks. So we really must double down on what it all comes down to, and that is a wartime mentality. Realizing that we have passed the time where we could just sit on our laurels and let diplomacy do its work. I'm not saying that diplomacy shouldn't still be relied upon. What I'm saying is that we must understand that as of right now, there are many instances, many conflicts, many situations within the geopolitical spectrum where diplomacy clearly has failed. Now, diplomacy, in many instances, and one only needs to study history to affirm this, diplomacy is only as strong as the deterrents backing it up. So if there's no weight behind my words, my diplomacy will fail to be successful. So in order to allow diplomacy to pave the way towards success, we must have the proper deterrence in place. And that deterrence isn't just our military capabilities, it's also our political rhetoric. And that's where it currently lacks, one of the areas where it currently lacks, in my opinion, in Western response regarding Russia, the SCO, and countries affiliated with that. NATO needs to rethink its strategy, not just pertaining to Russia. Yes, we have awoken to the Russian threat. We know it's there, we know we need to prepare ourselves. But that's the thing, it's not just the Russian threat. And what I see currently taking place right now is China testing the waters within Southeast Asia, while Russia is testing them within Eastern Europe. The recent drone incursion into Poland stands as a perfect example of this, and is very similar towards the incursions China has been waging into Taiwanese territories for years now. It's all about testing the waters. It's testing reaction time, testing the command and control structures of your enemy, mapping out locations, mapping out routes, coming up with strategies that will allow you to easily and deftly and effectively conquer certain areas or certain roads and pathways, so as to enhance the efficiency of your military operations and allow you to institutionalize direct control should you have achieved your strategic objectives in case of armed escalation. And China has not been doing this just in Taiwan, by the way. They've been mapping out underground energy networks within the Indian Ocean. They've been mapping out ocean routes close to the Japanese islands. They've been mapping out every part of the ocean, of the Pacific, close to their territory, as well as those pertaining to the Indian Ocean, in order to come up with the most effective strategies and pathways that they can utilize in terms it comes to an armed escalation on these waters and within these territories. So obviously what you want to do is you want to deny them as easy access to those areas. Increase your military presence. Mimic their maneuvers. Map out, let your presence be known. Not just to deter them, but also as a message to those countries that are currently on the fence whether or not to join the SCO, that hey, listen, we, the Western world or the United States, we are still the main power here. Aligning yourself with us is more fruitful than going at it with those other guys. It's all about posturing. It's all about rhetoric. Currently, Russia is usually relying on the information space in order to sustain its war effort in Ukraine, in order to muster new recruits, in order to muster geopolitical support for its cause. Rhetoric and information, and it doesn't even need to be the truth. Their claims are full of blatant lies and falsehoods, those that are easily debunked by just the most minor effort of intelligence gathering. But yet it works. Because guess what? The vast majority among us doesn't have the time to read and claw through every piece of information to find out the truth of it. As with many other facets of life, it's all about appearance. Sometimes who you appear to be is more important than who you actually are. And Russia plays that card very intricately and very efficiently. And I'm not saying that NATO should start a misinformation campaign. No, you don't even need to. But project. Project with strength. Project with unity. And project that open door policy, but expand it beyond the perimeters of the Washington Treaty of 1949. Because those guidelines are no longer applicable for the current threat landscape. China is the greatest future threat facing the Western world. Russia stands as the greatest one as of this point in time. But in order to remain 1 or 2 steps ahead of our enemy, our actions today will decide our efficiency in the conflicts of tomorrow. And that is something that I see NATO still being lazy and negligent. They can do more, they have to do more. And the longer they wait and the more momentum China and organizations like the SCO are gaining, the harder it will be to effectively combat them. This is all I want to share with you this time around. Once again, thank you very much for listening to this clip and for coming back to this channel. I hope to disseminate more content to you guys in the near future. As I've said, I'm still engaged in numerous other projects, but those are set to be concluded within the near term. And then I hope to devote as much time to this channel as possible. Feel free to leave a like beneath this video or a comment. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach out to me to one of my social media platforms, and I will aim to get back with you as quickly as possible. Once again, thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you all next time. Have a good day.